in smooth muscle, and different types of GI motility, right? Like what is peristalsis, what is segmentation, what is mass peristalsis. Also, you should know the neural control of intestinal motility that we'll discuss in detail, okay? And function of large intestine. So these are the objectives of the today's lecture, right? So GIT is what? Gastrointestinal tract, right? This tract is nothing but a tube. It is a tube-like structure, right? It is a tube-like structure, and it is 4 to 5 meter long, okay? With the same basic structure. Same basic structure means I will show you in the later slides. Okay, this one. The same basic structure means all the walls of the GI, be it stomach or small intestine or large intestine, it is the same. Means the innermost layer, it would be mucosa, okay, which has 3 layers. You all are aware of it: epithelium, lamina propria, and muscularis mucosae. So this is the innermost layer. Inside this, there is a lumen, okay, lumen of small intestine, or you can say lumen of large intestine, because the basic structure is same for the gastrointestinal tract, right? So this is the starting from inside to outside. The first layer is mucosa, and the next layer is submucosa, okay? And then we have muscle layer, or you can say muscularis externa, which has longitudinal muscle and circular muscle, right? And the outermost layer is called as serosa, okay, which has 2 layers, epithelium and the connective tissue, right? Now, regarding this diagram, layers are important, as we have discussed that the innermost is mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. Apart from these layers, you should know about the plexus. Very, very important for exam point of view. Plexus. So it has got intrinsic nerve plexus, which are of 2 types: myenteric plexus and the submucosal plexus, right? In the intrinsic nerve plexus, there are 2 plexes: myenteric nerve plexus and the submucosal nerve plexus. Now, you need to know about its location, where it is. So, myenteric nerve plexus, it is in the muscle layer, and submucosal nerve plexus is in the submucosa layer. Okay, here. So, as I said, that GI tract is a tube which is 4 to 5 meter long with the same basic structure. Okay, it has a smooth muscle wall. Okay, GIT is smooth muscle. It consists of smooth muscles and sphincters, which regulate the movement of food. Okay. As I said, that it has 2 muscles, 2 types of muscles, circular and the longitudinal, right? So circular muscle, when it will contract, what it will do? It will narrow the gut wall. See, this is the gut wall, right? And it has, suppose this is the circular, circular. Inside, this is the lumen. Then there are all the layers which we have discussed, right? So in the muscle layer, there will be circular muscle and the longitudinal muscle. So when this circular muscle will contract, it will contract like this. It will contract like this. So what will happen? The lumen will be narrowed, right? And when this longitudinal muscle, it will contract, what will happen? There will be shortening of the gut wall. This is the longitudinal muscle, right? So when it will contract, suppose from here it contract, so what it will do? It will shorten the length of the gut wall. So circular muscle is responsible for narrowing, and longitudinal muscle is responsible for shortening of the gut wall, right? The structure we have already discussed. So as I told you, it is important to know about the various layers of the GI wall and the nerve plexus which are present. About the GIT smooth muscle. GIT is consists of smooth muscle, right? Like heart, it is also consists of smooth muscle. The fibers are electrically connected with gap junctions. Gap junctions. I hope that you all know what is gap junction, right? So movement of electrical signal, it will be fast because of the gap junction, right? So movement of ions from one muscle to the next, it will be low resistance and it will be very fast. Okay. Also, when action potential, it occurs anywhere in the GI wall. It generally travels in all the direction. Okay. So the first property is gap junction. Second property is it travels in all the direction. And the distance that action potential travels depends on the excitability of the muscle, right? The smooth muscle of the gastrointestinal tract is excited by almost continual slow intrinsic electrical activity along the membranes of the muscles. What they mean to say that there is a basal electrical rhythm which is also called as slow waves. Okay, this is also called as slow waves. It is occurring continuously in the whole GI tract. Okay, excluding the this one esophagus. So it has got. I will explain it later in the later slides. It has two waves, slow waves and the spikes, right? Because the importance of the slow wave is it controls the motor activity of GI wall, okay, or GI tract. The slow wave, or you can say the basal electrical rhythm, it controls the motor activity of the GI wall. Now let us talk about these two waves. See, this is the slow wave. Okay, this is the slow wave, and these are the
Doctor,
spikes. Yes, yes.
can you change the color?
Color. Okay, sure. Which color you will prefer? I think.
Anything. The yellow is fine.
Okay,
Here.
okay, okay. So this one is the slow waves, right? And this is the spike potential. Spike potential is the true action potential. When it occurs, then the movement is fast, right? This is the true action potential. And these are the slow waves which occurs all the time in GI wall, right? It occurs all the time. There are slow changes in the resting membrane potential. Most gastrointestinal contractions occur rhythmically. The rhythm is determined mainly by the frequency of slow waves. Okay, so there's nothing more important. Just you know that these slow waves they occur continuously. Okay, and when there is spikes, that means action potential has generated, right? And then the actual contraction of the muscle takes place. Okay, not because of the slow wave. And these slow waves which I am saying again and again that it occurs continuously all the time in the GI wall, it is due to the pacemaker. Just like the pacemaker of the heart, that is ST node, here pacemaker of GI wall is interstitial cells of Kagel. Interstitial cells of Kagel, which is present where? It is present in the greater curvature of the heart, greater curvature of the, sorry, stomach, greater curvature of the stomach. So they are present here, and from here, this slow waves, they are originating and it is traveling throughout the GI wall. Okay. So you should know what is the pacemaker of gastrointestinal tract. So it is the interstitial cells of Kagel, okay, which produces the slow wave, which are also called as basal electrical rhythm. Basal electrical rhythm. Okay. So these slow waves, its intensity is 5 to 15 millivolt. This is important, can be asked in MCQ. Frequency, it is different in different part of GI tract, right? Like in the body of stomach, it is just 3, okay? 3 per minute. In duodenum, it is maximum, it is 12 per minute. And in terminal ileum, it is 9 to 12 per minute, okay? So as I said, that spike potentials, they are the true action potential. They are the true action potential. Sorry, I mean, the slides are not that clear. I don't know why it is appearing like this. They are automatically, when the resting membrane potential of the GI smooth muscle becomes more positive, about 40 millivolt, then these spike potential they generate. Okay. Resting membrane potential, again important. What is the resting membrane potential for GI wall or GI muscle? So it is minus 50 to minus 60 millivolts. Minus 50 to minus 60 millivolt. And when it becomes around minus 40 millivolt, then there is generation of spike potential. Okay. The second important thing regarding spike potential is the higher the slow wave potential, the greater the frequency of spike potential. Okay. Usually ranging from 1 and 10 spikes per second. And it is due to, this is important, this is due to slow calcium sodium channels. It is not because of sodium, just sodium. It is slow calcium and sodium channels. Okay. So these three things, that what is the action potential, sorry, what is the resting membrane potential of GI wall, and when spike potential it occurs, right? And what is the cause, what is the reason? So it is opening of slow calcium sodium channels. Factors that depolarize the membrane. So these are stretching of the GI wall or GI muscle. When we eat food, so when the food will reach to the stomach, it will stretch the stomach wall or stomach smooth muscle, right? And when this food, it will enter into the small intestine, again there also it will stretch. So like this. So stretching is the stimulus. It will cause depolarization of the membrane. Also due to the stimulation of uh, I think all the slide is overlapping. This much. Okay. By the acetylcholine. Okay. Also by the parasympathetic nervous system. Right. Parasympathetic nervous system is excitatory to GI wall, and sympathetic is inhibitory. Right. This I think you have been taught in autonomic nervous system. Also, stimulation by specific gastrointestinal hormone like motilin. Okay. Now, factors that hyperpolarize, or you can say make it less excitable, these are norepinephrine, epinephrine, secretin, GIPs, gastrointestinal peptide, also stimulation by sympathetic nervous system. As I said, this is inhibitory, right? And parasympathetic is stimulatory. So this you should know which autonomic nervous system is stimulatory and which one is inhibitory. This intestinal epithelium is the largest sensory organ in the body. One may ask you which one is having the largest epithelium. So it is the intestinal epithelium. Okay. In this intestinal epithelium, there are enterochromaffin cells. Okay. Enterochromaffin cells. And the wall of the intestine, it gets stimulated by distension. When you eat food, there will be distension and the wall will get stimulated, right? And then the motility will start. Okay, there are various motility for small intestine and large intestine, so it will all get started. Okay, also the osmolality, if there is change in osmolality or acidity or the digestive products, they all will stimulate. Okay, this enterochromaffin cells is secretes serotonin, which is called as 5-hydroxytryptamine, right? Enterochromaffin cells, it will secrete serotonin, which is called as 5-hydroxytryptamine, that stimulate the sensory nerves by 5-hydroxytryptamine receptors, which is also called as 5H3, right? Now, this one, I think you are aware of it, autonomic innervation of GI wall. Okay, so first we will see parasympathetic nervous system. As I said, it is the stimulatory, right? So parasympathetic supply, it comes from the vagus nerve. Where is vagus nerve? Where vagus nerve is in medulla oblongata. Okay. So vagus nerve arises from the nucleus, vagal nucleus, which is present in medulla oblongata, and it supplies the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and proximal half of the large intestine or colon. This you should memorize. Okay. So the vagus nerve, it will supply the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and the proximal half of the large intestine, which is also called as colon. Proximal half means this is your stomach, then duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Okay. Ileum is the last part of small intestine. Then starts the large intestine. So this part, it is like this, your uh, large intestine. So this part is the proximal part because it is proximal to the small intestine. So proximal part is what? Ascending colon and half of the transverse colon. Okay. Then pelvic nerve. It also arises from middle three sacral segments. Middle three sacral segments. S2, S3, and S4. And it supplies the distal half of the colon, rectum, and anal canal. So distal half here, half of the transverse colon, and this one, descending colon. Then this is the sigmoid colon, and this is the rectum, and this is the anal canal. So this is supplied by the pelvic nerve, okay, which originates from the middle three sacral segments. And this parasympathetic supply, it entirely terminate on local nerve plexus. Local nerve plexus means they are talking about the plexus, nerve plexus, which are present in the GI wall. And these are submucosal and myenteric. Already I have shown you in this picture. See, these two nerve plexus, they are also called as enteric, or you can say intrinsic. Okay, myenteric nerve plexus and the submucosal nerve plexus, right? Now, moving on to the sympathetic supply. As I told you that it is inhibitory to motility. Parasympathetic is stimulatory. On the other hand, this sympathetic is inhibitory, right? It arises from the spinal cord T8 to L2, as you can see in this picture. This is parasympathetic supply, okay? As I told you that it comes from the vagus nerve, from the medulla, and it will supply the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and half of the large intestine. Okay, and then the pelvic nerve, uh, it is coming from the S2, S3, and S4, right? And it will supply the distal half of the colon, distal half. So this is the distal half, descending colon, sigmoid, rectum, and this anal canal, right? Sympathetic supply, it comes from T8 to L2, as I told you, from here. And it will also supply the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, right? Uh, but it relies on collateral ganglia as celiac and mesenteric ganglia, okay? And reach GI via the greater and lesser splanchnic nerves. Now, this is important, very important, the enteric nervous system, okay? So, already in the previous slide, I have discussed about the submucosal plexus and the myenteric plexus, right? Submucosal plexus, it is present in submucosal layer, right? And myenteric plexus, it is present in the, or you can say between circular and longitudinal muscle layer, okay? Circular and longitudinal muscle layer. So the submucosal plexus, one can ask you the function. So it is secretory function of GI tract. Means it is responsible for secretion, for GI secretion, whatever is there, gas, juices or glands, they secrete. Okay, so this is responsible for secretory function. On the other hand, this myenteric, which is, see, you are supposed to remember both the names. In the exam, they can use any of these. Okay. So submucosal, it is also called as Meissner's plexus. And myenteric, remember this myenteric, it stands for muscle, myenteric. So this myenteric plexus, it lie between circular and longitudinal muscle layer. Circular and longitudinal muscle layer. So this myenteric plexus, it is also called as Orbach's plexus, right? So it is responsible for motor function. On the other hand, this submucosal, it is responsible for secretory function. What else? Yeah, the enteric nervous system function by itself. Okay, it function by itself, but requires some communication with the parasympathetic and sympathetic neurons. As you can see, this is the lumen of the GI tract. This is the epithelial lining, okay? And this is the mucosal layer where this submucosal plexus is present. And this is the muscle layer. This myenteric plexus is present, okay? As I said, that the enteric nervous system means the myenteric and submucosal plexus, they can function by itself, but they require some communication with the autonomic nervous system. As you can see, this the autonomic system, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, okay? So they end on these plexus, okay? So some mucosal plexus can talk to myenteric plexus. Myenteric plexus can talk to parasympathetic. Parasympathetic can talk to myenteric. Sympathetic can talk to myenteric. So there is, uh, I mean, a good communication between enteric nervous system and extrinsic nervous system. See, sympathetic and parasympathetic, uh, they form the extrinsic nervous system for the GIT. Okay, that you can say. Now, moving on the main topic, that is the motility. Motility. So there are four types of motility in small intestine. Okay, motility is different in different parts of the GI tract because the different part of GI tract has different functions. So motility is also different. Small intestine is having a different motility and large intestine is having different motility. Okay, so we are talking about small intestine. So it has peristaltic movement. It has got anti-peristaltic movement. Also, it has got peristaltic rush and segmenting movement. Right? Segmenting movement is also called as mixing movement. We will discuss later. Segmenting movement is also called as mixing movement. Okay. So we were talking about the motility, or you can say the movements in small intestine. So in this first we have peristaltic movement. So the main function of this peristaltic movement is it helps in propagation, or you can say propulsion of food in the aboral direction. In GIT there are two directions, right? Oral means from the mouth and aboral is towards the anus. So oral to aboral. So it helps propulsion of food from oral direction to aboral. So the peristaltic movement, it moves the chyme from the duodenum to large intestine. Okay. They move at a velocity of 0.5 to 2 centimeter per second. Okay. And it is faster in the proximal intestine, means in the duodenum and jejunum, it is faster as compared to ileum, right? The chyme normally passes from the pylorus of the stomach to the ileocecal valve in 3 to 5 hours. Okay. The chyme, what is chyme? Chyme is nothing but the food which is mixed with the gastric secretion. Okay. Gastric juice. So that will become chyme. Okay. So as I said, from the pylorus of the stomach is this one. This is the pylorus of the stomach. From here to ileocecal valve means the end of the small intestine. It takes 3 to 5 hours to reach. Okay. And this peristaltic movement is neurogenic, means it will depend on the enteric nervous system. Enteric nervous system means the Meissner's and the Auerbach's plexus or myenteric plexus. Okay, they depend on that, but persists after section of intrinsic nervous system. Means if we remove the supply sympathetic and parasympathetic, even then this movement, that is peristaltic movement, it will exist. Okay, and this motility, that is peristalsis, it is initiated by mucosal mechanoreceptor, because when the food will reach to the small intestine, it will stretch. Okay, so this is the mechanical action, right? So the mechanoreceptors will be stimulated. What is the mechanism? As I told you that GI wall has got two muscle, circular muscle and the longitudinal muscle. Circular muscle means contraction. It will decrease the size of the lumen. And this longitudinal will shorten the length of the um GI wall. Okay. So circular muscle, it contract proximally. Okay. And it will release what? It will release acetylcholine. Okay. and it will relaxes the distal to food bolus via VIP release neurons. Did you get this point? See, here there is bolus of food. Okay, so this small intestine, I mean, before the bolus, it will contract by releasing the which neuron? Acetylcholine releasing neuron. So there will be contraction, and in front of the bolus, it will release VIP, and that is vasoactive intestinal peptide. Okay, these neurons are present and they will release VIP. So there will be relaxation. Okay, so when it is here, there is contraction. So it will, and here relaxation. So what will happen? This bolus will move in the forward direction. Okay, as you can see here. Again, after reaching here, there will be contraction of the circular muscle, and here there will be contraction of the longitudinal muscle. Okay, there will be further propulsion of the bolus, right? So in this way, this process will keep on repeating, right, till a small the entire, I mean, chyme which is present, it is reached to the large intestine. Okay, so it was about the peristaltic movement. Then, as I said, that the second movement is anti-peristaltic movement, means opposite to the peristalsis. It can occur at the duodenum and distal part of ileum. Now, what is the use of this movement? Anti-peristalsis means it is going from the anal side towards the oral side. What is the use? It occurs, so because of this movement, what happens? There is regurgitation of intestinal content, which is present in the duodenum, into the stomach. Okay, see, this is the stomach, and this part is duodenum. So normally the food should go like this, but here it is going like this. Okay, so this duodenum, it will regurgitate the content into the stomach, back to the stomach. Okay, why it is occurring? It is occurring because here in the, see, whatever chyme, or you can say the food which enters into the intestine, it is highly acidic. Okay, and the duodenum cannot I mean, tolerate a lot of uh, time which is highly acidic. So it will start anti-peristaltic movement, and it will regurgitate the content into the stomach. Okay, so now the highly acidic chyme, it returns back into the stomach. So the acidity of the duodenum, it will be reduced. Okay, so it is kind of protective mechanism. Also, the distal part of ileum, it also regurgitates its content into the duodenum. But because of this, it will help in complete absorption. See, mainly the absorption takes place where? In the small intestine. Okay, so the chyme, or you can say the food which remains in the small intestine for longer duration, there will be better absorption. Okay, so this is the purpose of anti-peristaltic movement. Then the third type of movement is peristaltic rush, right? So this peristaltic rush, it is nothing but the strong waves. The strong peristaltic waves are called as peristaltic rush. Okay, and they spread rapidly over the long distance in small intestine. So in a simple way, in a simple language, this peristaltic rush is nothing but the strong peristaltic waves, right? They are not normally seen. They are not normally seen unless there is some intestinal obstruction or the mucosa is irritated by infection. Maybe there is food poisoning, okay, or some kind of infection, or food which is irritant to mucosa, okay. So it will initiate the peristaltic rash, okay, and it will lead to diarrhea and malabsorption. Why malabsorption? Diarrhea means loose motions, right? So in peristaltic rush, they are strong peristaltic wave. So food is not, staying in the small intestine for the desired time, right? So it is getting excreted or it is getting propelled into the large intestine, and from the large intestine, it is passed from the anus, right? So absorption, proper absorption of nutrients is not taking place. So the person will suffer from malabsorption. Okay, malabsorption. Now the next movement is segmenting movement. See, these are all are movements of small intestine. Okay, segmenting movement is also called as mixing movement. Mixing movements, right? Because it mixes the chyme with the intestinal juice. So mixing chyme with intestinal juice by moving it to and fro like this, like this. Okay. It is basically myogenic, means again, uh, it is controlled by the pacemaker cells. Pacemaker cells are the interstitial cells of Kaggle. Okay, they are controlled by that. So they persist after section of extrinsic nerves, means they are talking about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. Also after blocking the enteric nervous system, means they are talking about the Meissner's and myenteric plexus. They are not dependent on these two, but they are dependent on the pacemaker cells. Maybe asked in your MCQ. Okay. Now, mechanism of mixing movements. So what happens, as I told you, there are circular muscles and there are longitudinal muscle. So the circular muscle contracts at several sites. Okay. Several sites at small intestine, and it will divide the small intestine into equal segments, around 2 to 3 segments long. As you can see in this picture, this is the small intestine, right? So it divides the small intestine at in equal, division is equal. Okay, you can see here. Then contraction appears in the middle of each segment. Okay, so this was the first step, dividing the small intestine into equal segments, and then contraction will occur. See, here there is division. Okay, here these are they have shown the contraction. So this is the first step. These two are first step, and here in between these contraction, again there is next contraction like this. So what happened? This food, it will move to and fro, to, and there is no propagation or there is no propulsion of food, but mixing is occurring in the small intestine. And the chyme, which is present in the its intestine, it will thoroughly mix with the intestinal juice. Okay, so this is the segmenting movement or mixing movement. The name segmenting movement is because of this mechanism that it divides the small intestine into segments. Okay. So the circular muscles contract at several sides, dividing the small intestine into nearly equal segments. Okay. And then contractions appear in the middle of each segment, as I have shown, in the middle of each segment. This was the segment. This was the segment. And then in the middle of the segment, the second contraction in the middle of the. So in this way, see the color of the chyme, it also changes because it is getting mixed with the intestinal juice. It is getting mixed with the intestinal juice. And there is no net propagation of the chyme. Chyme is, it remains same at the same place, okay, to and fro movement only. There is no propulsion. Propulsion is done only by the peristaltic movement. And this process is repeated, okay. Now, moving on to the large intestine, let us see first the anatomy of the large intestine. So this was the last part of the uh, small intestine. So this is the cecum. This is the ascending colon, okay, because it is going up. And this is the hepatic flexure, okay. This is the transverse colon because it is in the transverse direction. So it is the transverse colon. This is the splenic flexure, means here there is spleen and here there is liver. Then this is the descending colon because it is going down. That is why this name is given descending colon. And then this S shape, sigma, this S shape, it is called as sigmoid colon, right? This is called as sigmoid colon. And this is the rectum, which is normally it is empty. Okay, feces is stored in the sigmoid colon. And this is the anus. Okay, if you see the cut section, this is the sigmoid colon, right? This is the transverse rectal folds they have shown. This is the rectum. Okay, you can see this is the rectum. And what is important here is regarding defecation reflex. This one is the this is the internal anal sphincter. Internal anal sphincter. And the outside, this is the external anal sphincter, which is made up of skeletal muscle. Okay. So regarding definition, you should know these structures: internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. Okay. Now, large intestine, what are the functions? Functions are very important. Secretion of large amount of mucus, absorption of water and compact material into feces. Okay. They also produce vitamins. Okay. Large intestine, the bacteria which are present in large intestine, they produce vitamins. Also, the last function of large intestine is storage of fecal matter. Storage of fecal matter prior to defecation. Okay. Main function of each part of the colon. So the ascending colon, it is mainly responsible for processing of chyme. Okay. And this transverse colon, it is basically for storage of feces and dehydration of, because here what will happen, there will be absorption of water. Okay. So feces will become more solid. Okay. Also feces are stored here. Then this part, it is just like a passage for feces. Okay. And then again, this sigmoid colon, it is the reservoir for fecal matter, and it can accommodate up to 500 ml of feces, up to 500 ml of feces, right? Secretions of the large intestine. So it has got crypts of Leverkusen. See, this one is very, very important. Crypts of Leverkusen. They are present in large intestine, and here there is no villi. In the small intestine, there are finger-like projections which are called as villi. And these villi are responsible for absorption of nutrients, right? But in large intestine, it is absent. It is absent. So important for exam point of view. Also, there are goblet cells which secrete mucus. Also, it provides an adherent medium for holding fecal matter together. Okay. So when the pelvic nerve, means we are talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, when they get stimulated, it increases the mucus secretion. It increases the mucus secretion. Okay. And this occurs along with increase in peristaltic motility of the colon. Okay, absorption in large intestine. So absorption, it occurs mainly in the proximal half of the colon, means the ascending colon and the transverse colon, half of the transverse colon. So absorption is the function of proximal half of the colon. And what is absorbed? Water, bile salts, urobilinogen, stercobilinogen, and the toxins. They are all absorbed in the proximal half of the colon. Okay. Also, in colon, there are bacteria, okay, which are useful for us. Why? Because these bacteria, they digest small amount of cellulose, which is not digested by the other part of the GI. It forms the vitamin K, B12, thiamine, and also it forms various gases. Okay. And most importantly, these colonic bacteria, they form vitamin K. Okay. Because vitamin K is very, very important for blood coagulation. Okay. It is important for blood coagulation and it is formed by the colonic bacteria. Although vitamin K alone cannot cause coagulation, it needs other clotting factors also. Okay. Motility in the large intestine, there are two movements, mixing movement, which is called as haustration. Please do remember this name. Mixing movement means haustration. Okay. And propulsive movement is called as mass peristalsis. Mass peristalsis. Propulsive movement means peristalsis. Okay. So peristalsis, when it occurs in large intestine, it is called as mass peristalsis. Okay. And the transit of small labeled markers through the large intestine occurs in 36 to 48 hours. Means movement of chyme in the large intestine, it takes 36 to 48 hours. Okay. Let us discuss the segmenting movement. Again, segmenting movement means there will be segments. Okay. And when it occurs in the large intestine, it is called as haustrations. Haustrations. Okay. So contractions of the circular muscles divide the colon into sacs called the haustra. See, you can, if you can, wait a minute, right? These are the haustrations. And this is because of the contraction of the circular muscle. They form sac-like structures, which are called as haustrations. Okay. And these sacs are further shortened by tinea coli, which is present in the, these are the in the colon. Okay, tinea coli. They provide bands. They are very slow and they occur every 25 minutes. Every 25 minutes, this segmenting movement. So this segmenting movement, which is called as horstration, it is because of the contractions of the circular muscle, which divide the colon into sacs, about 2.5 centimeter long sacs, which are called as haustra. Mass peristalsis or mass movement, it propels the feces from colon towards the anus. And usually this movement occur only a few times every day. Okay? Because this mass peristalsis, it is responsible for defecation. Defecation, okay? Mass peristalsis is responsible for defecation. Usually this movement occurs only a few times every day, as I said. And it occurs 10 minutes in the morning before or after breakfast, right? You might have observed that in the morning when you take tea or you take your tea, coffee, or any solid food, you feel like visiting the washroom for defecation, right? So this is because of this mass peristalsis. Okay, this is because of the mass peristalsis. And for this, neurogenic factors which are responsible are gastrocolic reflex and parasympathetic stimulation. When there is parasympathetic stimulation, then also this mass movement can occur, and due to gastrocolic reflex. What is gastrocolic reflex? Gastro means stomach, stomach, and colic means colon. So what happens when you eat, food reaches the stomach and it will stretch the stomach wall or stomach smooth muscle, right? And in response to this stretching, this colon, it will increase the motility. It will increase the motility and you will feel like visiting the washroom for defecation. Okay, so this is gastrocolic reflex. Let me check how many students are there. I will be back. $32. Just 32 students are present. Okay, defecation, it is nothing but voiding of feces. Okay. Feces is formed in the large intestine and it is stored in the sigmoid colon. See, storage, it occurs in a sigmoid colon, right? Always remember. And your rectum is empty until you want to defecate, right? And as I said that the defecation, it is because of the mass movement. So when the mass movement occurs, it will bring the your feces from the sigmoid colon into the rectum. And once the feces, it reaches the rectum, it it causes defecation, right? So because of mass movement, as I told you, it drives the feces into the sigmoid or pelvic colon. Okay, it drives the feces into the sigmoid or pelvic colon. And the desire for defecation occurs when some feces enters rectum, as I said. Normally, the rectum is empty, right? And the feces is stored where? In the sigmoid colon, right? So because of mass movement, which occurs due to stretching, when you eat or you drink, then this mass movement, it is started and it will cause, it will cause the sigmoid, the feces from the sigmoid colon, it will enter into the rectum, right? And the defecation reflex will be initiated. In short, you can say that defecation involves contraction of rectum and relaxation of both the sphincters, right? Internal as well as external sphincters. Suppose only if there is relaxation of the internal sphincters, there will be no defecation unless the external anal sphincter, it is also, uh, relaxed. Sorry, is there any question or just the noises? Okay, this diagram shows the defecation reflex, right? So this is your sigmoid colon. As I said, this is the site for storage of feces. So feces is stored here, right? And as I said, when you will eat, okay, this gastrocolic reflex along with the mass movement, it will cause entry of this feces into the rectum, okay? And because of this stretching, this information, it will go to the spinal cord, okay? S2, S3, and S4. And in response to this, what will happen? This internal anal sphincter. I told you that there should be contraction of rectum. There will be relaxation of internal and external anal sphincters. Then and then only defecation process is possible, right? So because of this stretching, there will be relaxation of external anal sphincters, but still internal anal sphincter is contracted, right? Sorry, internal is relaxed and external is contracted. See, you might have observed that in day-to-day life, there is mass movement, and you are in the college or in the lecture, you don't want to defecate. So voluntarily, you can, I mean, prevent this defecation. This is because of the external anal sphincter, because it is still contracted. It is still contracted. This internal is relaxed, right? But this external is still contracted. So when your brain is okay, I mean, your brain is satisfied that there is favorable environment for defecation. Okay. So when you find the favorable environment, then this external anal sphincter, it also gets relaxed and you are able to defecate. So in simple language, for defecation, 3 factors are required: contraction of your rectum, relaxation of external anal sphincter, as well as internal anal sphincter. Then and then only you can defecate, right? And this external anal sphincter, it is under your control, depending on the uh, favorable condition. You can hold the, defecation process, right? So this is about the defecation reflex. If you have any query, any question, you can ask. Or I shall leave.
Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome, dear.